living on a busy road.
No kidding.
Did you grow up with the NES, PlayStation, Star Wars, cartoons, and 80s TV? Do you like to think who would win in a fight between Batman and the Master Chief? Comics, games, movies, music, and TV. They're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of geeks. Games, movies, music, and TV. They're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of This Week in Geek. This Week in Geek.
And now it's time for another special feature.
And welcome out to This Week in Geek's special edition coverage for Avengers Endgame. I'm your host, Mike the Birdman Dodd, but I'm not alone as I assemble my own team of secret warriors, you might say, for our talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I am joined with the man upstairs,
The incredible Mr. Tristifer.
And of course, it wouldn't be This Week in Geek without my capable cohort, I'm trying to think, how would I describe Alex? He's more useful than Hawkeye, yet less awesome than War Machine. I don't know. What are you, Alex?
Large and in charge.
Our very own incredible Bulk.
Yes, that
Thor,
works.
He's now Thor.
He's Dad Bod Thor.
I wish I was Dad Bod Thor.
So yes, guys, we are here to talk about Avengers Endgame, which the spoiler ban by the Russo brothers has officially lifted this past Monday. And if you haven't seen it, you should probably stop listening to the show right now, as we're going to be talking about spoilers, our thoughts about the movie, some thoughts about the marketing, and basically our thoughts overall about Avengers Endgame, such as it is. So if you haven't seen the movie, stop listening and come back, because that's what a reasonable person would do.
And can I say that the spoiler ban lifting on Monday came with a vengeance, with the Far From Home trailer coming out full of spoilers for Endgame. So if you want to see the next Spider-Man movie, make sure you watch Endgame first before even touching the trailer.
Exactly.
I really doubt that there's anybody that would want to see Spider-Man that didn't also see Avengers.
Yeah, that's the first time I can recall a trailer ever coming with a spoiler warning.
Yeah, because they're so close together, I think.
I'm pretty sure it happened before. I don't think it was for Marvel, though.
Oh, God, no. I've never seen a Marvel property do this before.
I was going to say, and it wasn't like a superhero movie. I'm drawing a blank now, but I do remember specifically somebody coming out and saying, hey, there's spoilers here, or like, here be spoilers, watch out.
Those came out
Matrix,
so close together.
maybe?
You know what? I think so. Okay, yeah. Remember, at the end of the second Matrix movie, if you waited till the end of the credits, they had that extended trailer to show off the third movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that trailer dropped, I think, the same day the movie came out. So they actually warned, like, it dropped online back in the early days of when everybody would go to, like, QuickTime movies to watch the trailers, like, before YouTube. So I remember there being something saying, like, a warning, you should watch the movie before you see this, because this is the spoilers for the second part. Because remember when they marketed it, it wasn't like it was a movie 2 and movie 3. They were trying to market it like it was one giant movie that was split in two.
Mm-hmm.
One giant, terrible movie. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Matrix. We're here to talk about Marvel.
So, all of us have now finally seen Avengers Endgame. I went and saw it on the Thursday night at the first showing here in Guelph, which was at 6 o'clock. Wonderful crowd, had a great reaction to it. We had several people dressed up in the Avengers time suits. We had a female Thor. We had a couple of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. It was quite the spectacle. And not unlike going to a Star Wars movie or any other big franchise property where people decide to dress up and have a little bit of fun with it. My theater was great. People were cheering. People were clapping. People were crying at the points where people were supposed to be crying, I would guess. Even I teared up a couple times. And I've said this before on the show with Alex. We live in such an era of pop culture that this is this generation's Star Wars. Like, where were you when Endgame came out? Where were you when Iron Man first came out? Sort of thing. And I can't... You can say what you will about the later Star Wars movies. They haven't been able to capture the public's imagination like the Marvel Cinematic Universe has.
And there's like you said, with pop culture, there's references to these Marvel movies in places that you might not expect it. Like Eminem has a song called Rap God, and he references Asgard and Thor and Odin. It's not just a little reference like, a Marvel. No, he's actually going fairly in depth with this line in his song. So it's permeating everywhere. Everyone knows about the Marvel cinematic universe.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing just how deep the culture has got with it. I mean, people were surprised when how successful Iron Man 1 was. I think it had a box office of 500 million or something like that. It was a really big success on what was essentially a C-list character in the Marvel comics history. Because Iron Man, he was okay, he's smart, he has armor, he's an Avenger, who gives a shit? Like when it's always been Wolverine or the X-Men, and the Avengers are always seen as they're like X-Men but less cool sort of thing. And then the early 2000s and the kind of made them cool again with the Ultimates run of the comics, which did make them a little bit neater. And now to think that kids have grown up with these movies, like people have now taken their sons and daughters to see the first Iron Man when they're very young, and now they've come across this 11-year journey to see how these characters have grown, how these characters have now completed their arcs. That's important to pop culture, and just to seeing how people react to this. I mean, when you think about what Tony did when he was a self-absorbed billionaire playboy, and now he's literally the guy that saved the universe. You think about that in terms of another pop culture franchise. You look at, say, Star Wars. Luke Skywalker starting out as this farm boy all by himself, wanting to go to the Imperial Academy. Now he's this Jedi Knight, face of a rebellious faction against this overwhelming empire. That's a journey. And a lot of people went along for that journey, and it was a huge pop culture phenomenon in the 70s and 80s. And now we have Iron Man in the 2000s and the 2010s. And a lot of people, we've now had 22 movies of build-up for these arcs. This is a more complete arc than I can ever say I've ever seen in pop culture.
And it's so complex, too. It's not just the journey of Iron Man. He might be kind of the figurehead of phase 1 through 3, but there's so many other storylines to follow. Thor's had his own journey that's admittedly gotten a lot more interesting as it's gone. There's Ant-Man. Ant-Man is an interesting character. You got Captain America and his arc, which is now finished as well, but will continue in its own way where he's passing off the torch to someone else. There's all these different characters that you can relate to on different levels. You can follow their stories and the different directions they take and pick and choose your favorite heroes. With Star Wars, like, yes, I like Darth Vader. Yes, I like Leia. I like Luke. But really the story's about Luke. Marvel, it's about everybody. It's about all of the Avengers. So it's much more complicated. And I think that lends itself to how many movies there are and how many ways they can tell these stories and different angles they can take to these adaptations from the comics.
Yeah, and when you think about it, it was basically the butt of everybody's jokes back in 2008 or so. When was it 2008 that Iron Man 1 came out? Something around there.
Yep.
Do you remember, like, people didn't expect it to make that kind of money? They were thinking like maybe 200-300 million worldwide for if it did really well, and it broke all those, like, everybody's expectations. And then there was the MTV Movie Awards, where they had multiple skits about Iron Man, and Robert Downey Jr. was in it with what's his name, with Jack Black and a bunch of other people, and they made fun of it. And they had like the stereotypical, jaded teenager, and they're like, "So what'd you think of Iron Man?" And he's like, "Oh, it'll do until Dark Knight comes out, then you're screwed." I remember that line from that specifically because everybody thought Batman, was going to overtake it, and it did. But they always thought of the DC movies as being the successful movies, and Marvel movies being nothing unless they were X-Men.
Yeah, X-Men was kind of where a lot of people got into the comic book thing to begin with in the movie universe, but it didn't quite take off the way that Marvel did. Marvel managed to strike gold with everything they've done, and they took their time and built up a lot of stories, building to a culminating moment, and they kind of coined this new... It's not new necessarily, but no one's done it quite like Marvel with their Endgame, or not the Endgame, sorry, the end cinematic... I can't talk. End of credits scenes is what I'm trying to say, where it leads into the next story, it leads into the next movie, and drops hints and things where if you like the comics, if you know something that happens in the comics already, you might be able to guess what's going to happen next. You might be able to know what's coming up in the future MCU movies. And no one's really done something quite so inside, not joke, but kind of Easter eggs here and extra information. If you have that passion, it rewards you for having that passion already.
The closest thing I can think of is the end of the old James Bond movies. They would sometimes tease what the next Bond movie is going to be with a title or something to that extent. Like I remember Jaws surviving, and then you knew he was going to be in the next Bond movie. But this almost harkens back to what they used to do in the old movie serials, which is actually where a lot of the Marvel properties got their start, as far as cinematically, back in the 40s, in those old, Republic Pictures serial, and it would have Captain Marvel, blah, 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 that sort of crap, where they've serialized these movies in a way that only shorts had been done, or, 30-minute movies have been done before, not these 2-hour epics. If you add up everything in these last 22 movies, as far as box office goes, I wouldn't be surprised if it's now the most successful movie franchise property of all time, beating Bond and beating Godzilla and everything combined.
22 titles is a lot, so there's a lot of potential to build
22
it up.
titles with
successful.
With what about is it 3 or 4 of them now that have passed the $1 billion mark?
Yeah, we're talking over $2 billion for Endgame alone, and I believe Infinity War was pretty close to $2 billion.
Which is crazy. While we're talking, I'll look it up because I want to see. This might be the first box office $10 billion or more dollar property ever.
Well, I know as of right now, it's the second most profitable movie of all time. It overtook Titanic in just a little under 2 weeks. It's on track to beat Avatar, but Avatar had 5,000 days, something like that, for it to make its $2.97 billion run. But it also had inflated ticket sales, too.
I actually have the numbers right here. So for the 22 movies, there is a $4.2 billion budget for a total of $21 billion it's made so far. So, now some have made more than others, but you're almost averaging $1 billion per picture.
That's absolutely insane. It's every single movie has a high degree of success. They haven't really made a flop at all. There's a couple movies that didn't do well. They're kind of the Incredible Hulk. So the Incredible Hulk wasn't exactly great.
I think I'm the only one who liked Thor: The Dark World. I hated the first one.
I like to call it Thor, I can't see anything in my theater because it's literally too dark, the world.
Yeah, that one had some problems.
And the pacing was just kind of not there. The villain was uninteresting.
Yeah. I don't even remember who it was. Yeah. And it was also
Malekith.
Well, it was directed by, I think it was one of the Game of Thrones main directors, which is all fine and good because they're like, hey, it's the same sort of idea. But Game of Thrones has a very different tone and very different. The Marvel universe is very colorful. And even the first Thor movie is basically Shakespeare, because you had Kenneth Branagh directing it, and it was basically made to look like a Shakespearean play. The second movie was made to be a dreary Game of Thrones / a Lord of the Rings feel. And then the third one comes out, and they finally hit it this is now a comic book. This is high science fantasy.
Yeah, it hit the whole Jack Kirby weirdness with it. And Thor Ragnarok, I think, is one of the best movies of the MCU, hands down.
It's one of my favorite movies of the last, 15 years, period.
Mm-hmm. It was so not what I expected, and I loved it. Like, it took the character. I mean, I thought Thor was cool in the Avengers movies, but in his own movies, I was like, eh. But with Thor Ragnarok, I was like, holy shit, you really made this kind of awesome.
They were taking the piss out of themselves, really. They decided they wanted to do something different. They wanted to make a silly story that still moves the plot forward, and they managed to strike a perfect balance between the two. It's a hilarious movie, but it also has its serious moments, and it sets things up for Infinity War fairly well on that story thread. There's quite a few different plot points to hit before you reach Infinity War and Endgame, and it set up Thor's line perfectly in an entertaining fashion where it wasn't boring, the pacing was just right, the comedy level was, well, really high and injected everywhere, but they did it in a way that wasn't cringy. It didn't make you go, oh god, it's just a comedy. No, it's a really, really funny movie, but it also takes itself as seriously as it needs to.
Well, if you look at the MCU movies, the ones that have been the most successful have been in two camps. Either directed by the Russo brothers, because they might be like this generation's John McTiernan and like James Cameron, as far as action directors go. Like, they're by far above and beyond the best, like, straight up action directors of the last 20, 25 years. And then you have the other really successful ones have been movies directed by, non-traditional like superhero action directors. They're always like comedy directors. Like Taika Waititi, the guy that directed Thor, he's also the guy that directed What We Do in the Shadows, the vampire comedy, and it's part of the like that sort of, was it the Flight of the Conchords group?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got that quirky New Zealand comedy, somebody who's traditionally just pure comedy or dark cerebral comedy, so, like, not like broad, like Farrelly Brothers slapstick comedy, somebody who's more witty than anything. And then you got James Gunn, who comes from like that trauma background, that subversive dark comedy, creates some of the most funny and successful big budget movies now of all time. Like that, it's the non-traditional director. Like the traditional successful, I'm going to say in quotes, director of a superhero thing either was extremely super serious, like a Christopher Nolan, which works for only certain types of characters, or you had the director
Sam Raimi.
Yeah, you had somebody like Sam Raimi who tried to balance it, but Sam Raimi almost, I'm gonna, maybe it's my own opinion, but I don't think his style of movie making would work anymore to make the kind of money they're expecting now.
Not now, no. It's not. You couldn't make Spider-Man 2 now.
He's and even like Bryan Singer, he's sort of lost touch when it came to what was happening with the X-Men franchise. Like Days of Future Past was good, but they went instead. They moved super serious with the director. I forget his name, the one that did Logan. Like, you kind of either have to be catering to the very serious like cinephile, moviephile versus the traditional comic book movie person, or you have to be very, very witty and funny. Well, or you can mix the two of them together like Deadpool did. So, like, it's interesting how each of the studios has sort of gone a different route. Marvel has found the most success, with these big budget movies, doing the super ridiculous, funny, over the top cartoon, or the serious action. And then you've got Fox, who everybody thought was going to be completely lost in the shuffle when Marvel started getting all their properties back, and instead they went, hey, there's a market that Marvel and Disney aren't currently catering to, which is the R-rated adult market. And they didn't want to go the route of like what Lionsgate or what was it or New Line did back when they did Blade and all that, where it just seemed like it was rated R for the sake of being rated R. They found stories now that actually worked with Deadpool and Logan, and it'll be interesting to see now that Fox has been reabsorbed. Are they going to continue, like, are these properties going to be pulled into the MCU, or are they going to be Like, are they still going to keep them separate? Like, hey, there is a revenue stream that we're making because Deadpool proves we can make several $100 million off of an R-rated movie.
I think they'd be very foolish to not continue making Deadpool the way it has been going. And with the success of Logan, like you said, they would be very dumb to not realize you can make bank if the stories are good, and people will go pay to see it. I mean, for example, a character who should work well in the R-rated realm but never really has is the Punisher. I remember when they made the Thomas Jane PG-13 version.
Which
good Punisher, shitty movie.
I am pretty sure that was still rated R in the States, and it was only like I think it was PG here. Like, because I remember seeing it in theaters, or was it 14A? It was
maybe 14A.
Like, because I know Punisher Warzone got an 18A because it was hilariously over the top and gory. But the Thomas Jane one, I remember seeing in, like, was it grade 9 or 10 or something whenever it came out. And I remember thinking it was pretty cool. I didn't know who Kevin Nash was as the Russian, but it was a cool movie. It had a good tone. It just didn't make the money I think it should have made. And then Punisher Warzone was admittedly a terrible movie, but hilariously awesome and over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the Ghost Rider. Like, I want to see Nick Cage in the MCU.
I think that'd be kind of funny if they were to bring him back as Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider. I think that'd be kind of funny, actually.
They'd be like, aren't you like, it's like, you're supposed to be like in your 30s. Aren't you like 1,000,000 years old?
But to swing things back around to Avengers Endgame, so we've had 22 movies to build up this entire cinematic universe, unprecedented in its complexity in terms of payoff, in terms of character arcs. And Endgame gives everybody a moment to shine, which is, I think, a remarkable accomplishment in and of itself. Now, that's not to say Endgame doesn't have its problems, because it does. One thing I will say for Endgame is, for a 3-hour movie, it certainly doesn't feel like it.
No, everyone that I've seen it with and everyone that I know that has gone to see the movie so far, their first viewing did not feel like 3 hours. They just said it went by really, really fast. They had no idea it had been that long. They were expecting to be worried about how much they have to pee. They thought, my ass is going to hurt. And for the majority of them, it was no problem. It just felt like a regular length movie.
Or you got an intermission like I did when the fucking power went out.
Yeah, some technical difficulties are bound to happen here and there. That's very unlucky. But even without
as far as spoilers go, they rewound it, they said, to where it was supposed to be. But long story short, the part where I missed the part where Thor, spoilers, where Thor goes back in time and he goes to like talk to his mother, sort of thing. I missed that. And I missed some of where Nebula is captured. And I had to piece it together as I went along after I got my free movie tickets, because they gave me free movie passes, because fuck that. I paid like $17 to go see that movie in 3D on like the second day it was out.
Well, it's apparently there's a guide out there that tells you exactly when you can go pee and not miss much. So there are moments that aren't as intense or important to the story. It's just sometimes the timing isn't there.
It's just filler.
So basically,
your interruption wasn't perfect.
Yeah. You could have gone pee pretty much any time that Scarlett Johansson was
San
on the
Francisco.
Screen. Or any
I
time that
completely
Hawkeye-
disagree.
Because I'm so glad they killed her. Because I hate her so much.
See, I'm
The only
disappointed.
problem-
I loved her arc.
The only thing I didn't like about Black Widow's character is the little funny face she makes whenever she's trying to do something intense. She kind of like squinches her face together and like butt teats a little bit. It's weird.
Hey,
but otherwise,
really
I love her character.
Think hard, but I can't really think that hard. You know what? I think I'm still jaded and disappointed that it wasn't Emily Blunt, because she was originally cast and then had to drop out way back to take other. I think it was Wolfman or something like that. She had to take. But she was the original choice for Black Widow, and she's 1,000,000 times better actress and, in my opinion, better looking. So the 1-2 punch of having her would have been so much better. Whereas Scarlett Johansson, every picture she gets worse and worse at acting and is more and more bland. This time she was a little better. She handles her scenes a little better, but like her and Hawkeye really don't have a purpose in most of the movies. If you notice, like they're just sort of there.
Well, they're supposed to be the characters we relate to because they are not superpowered. They are just ordinary SHIELD agents.
Yeah, but in reality, you end up relating to the people that have superpowers more. You relate to, Dad Bod Thor, or actually probably the person that most people relate to is Ant-Man. I would say he's the closest to be, like, he's a normal dude. He is not very smart. He's just a witty sort of street smart guy. He doesn't have any powers.
He's clever.
He's just sort of there. Like he's the most normal, because Hawkeye and Black Widow, like, how do you relate to people that are fucking trained assassins? You probably have you're easy. It's easier to relate to the guy who's just like, you know what, I was a thief and I'm still a family man, and I want to reform, and I just happen to try to do the right thing when I can. He's probably the most relatable to normal people, other than maybe Spider-Man, because everybody's been a teenager and they know how hard that is.
Mm-hmm.
And even then with Spider-Man, he's got all those superpowers, so it's not quite the same. Like you said, Scott Lang is a very normal family man. He can think quickly on his feet, but that's a fairly normal human trait. So it's easy to put yourself in his situations, as opposed to Captain America, who is always super noble and, he's got America's ass, and he's, the right guy. And it's just, he's this super person, and there's just no level to relate to there. And Tony Stark is this incredibly just witty and super rich and super smart, and just gets it no matter what the situation is. And I can't relate with that. I'm an idiot. There's just no way. But as for Hawkeye and Black Widow, I think Hawkeye I find somewhat relatable because he has the family as well, and he's just trying to do what's right for the people he cares about. And he does have a sort of superpower in that he pretty much never misses. He's always super accurate. Black Widow is just Black Widow.
Yeah. What's your superpower? I kill Yakuza. That's basically his power.
I kill stuff good.
But let's talk about that a little bit. To talk about Hawkeye and Black Widow, especially with the Soul Stone scene. I'm sad Black Widow's gone, because I really thought the snap would have brought her back. But there's a lot of things I didn't expect.
Yeah.
I thought the snap would have brought back Vision.
Well, no, the snap. Remember, it wasn't
Anybody who died in the snap.
It's how they worded the wish, or what the wish was, because they're desperate. The snap was, and their plan was, let's return everybody that the snap killed. The snap didn't kill those people, so that's why they're not back. So
return everyone, but don't change anything that's happened in the last 5 years.
Yeah, we're gonna.
But Hulk even said, "I tried to bring her back and I couldn't."
That's sort of a throw. Well, her case is like
soul for a soul.
It's not just soul for a soul. It's the idea is, to get the Soul Stone, you are erased from existence. Period. Like this universe, you no longer exist.
Yeah,
you are split into atoms that cannot be put together.
You're killed there, and it's a permanent exchange. Red Skull said.
Vision didn't come back because Vision's not alive. He's not. He's as much as an AI. Like, he's an AI. He's an artificial intelligence, but he was technically not organic, because remember, it was organic life. Snapping the finger wouldn't have even killed him in the first place.
Well, he was technically alive. Technically,
well, no, but it was. Remember, Thanos' plan was to kill all biological life, or kill half of. So he's not a biological. So any artificial intelligence or androids wouldn't have died. So this would have been a universe where half of the biologicals are dead and every AI is still alive.
I don't know. It would depend on how the souls. Basically, I think anything that has a soul, and then we're getting in the metaphysical, if you really want to break it down. But I get where you're kind of coming from on that.
So yeah, I was going to say, if you want to, do we want to go bit by bit through the plot? Like, we don't need to explain the plot, I think, in full, because people know. But like, I would say a thing to really touch upon in here is how they're going to use the plot that happened in this movie to set up those Disney Plus TV shows first, and then we can probably talk about like the movies that we think are going to come next and so on.
Well, one of the things I want to talk about this specifically in this movie is how they handle time travel. They don't do it like Back to the Future. They don't do it like Terminator. They do it like Dragon Ball Z, where basically you can go back in time, but you can't come back to your own timeline and have it changed, because then the you that goes back wouldn't be the same you that you're coming back to. It's fucked up logic, but you're creating a divergent timeline.
You know what's kind of funny, though? It's not 100%, but do you know that this time travel, or the way that time works in this, is actually a little closer to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure time travel?
What happens in that movie that makes it so similar?
The idea of them playing... Okay, best way to explain it is, you know how in Bill and Ted, when they're sort of stumped, they're like, how are we going to, do this? They end up leaving clues for themselves, and they say we should go back and fix it so that we'll then have this plot device fixed in the future, sort of thing. Like they think, hey, make a mental note, go and do something to fix this. They sort of do it a little bit in the movie, but the logic behind... you can't change changing the past won't erase your memories of what's happening now. Like you're set in your path. Your present is current. Like, how do I explain it without going into the metaphysical part of it?
Because time travel is too complicated as a plot device.
Okay, so the ancient one, how the ancient one explains everything on strings. Basically that you splinter things off, but the path that you're on never changes. Your reality.
Yeah, I think Hulk explains the logic of time travel and why you can't affect anything that's in your reality by going in time.
Because you are a constant is the idea.
Exactly.
So if you make changes to the past, that's fine, because your present won't change. So the idea is, if you go back to the past and change something and you magically find it sort of in front of you, it was always supposed to happen like that, because it was always going to happen. Not that your destiny is set in stone. It's that no matter what you do to the past to change, your mind won't change. So unlike the Back to the Future or a lot of other time travel stuff where you magically have your mind erased, or you don't even have any knowledge of the past changing, or you have some sort of divergent thing where you have two memories in your brain, sort of thing that a lot of TV shows and movies try to do. It's not that. It's you're the constant. Time isn't.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm trying to sum it up in an easy way to understand. If you are in a room and the lights are on, and you go back in time 1 minute, turn the lights off, and come back to your original time, the lights are still going to be on, because you can't change your current reality. You've just created an alternate reality in which the lights are off. That's it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to think about it. Like I said, you are constant, reality isn't.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at with the Bill and Ted stuff, because their memories don't change in it or anything.
I'm just trying to make it less about one's personal memory and more about reality as a fabric.
I just found it interesting that
thing.
it's basically, it's a similar way that time travel is done there. And did you notice? I don't think that was one of the movies they mentioned either as how time travel doesn't work.
No.
They did mention Bill and Ted, I think, as a throwaway.
I've mentioned Die Hard as a throwaway too, and then no, wait, that's not one.
But yeah, as far as what's happened here is, if you notice, some of the stuff that they do in their time heist you'd be like, oh, this doesn't add up. They didn't fix that plot hole. No, they were very concise. There's not really any plot holes in this. Every single thing that wasn't fixed is now a splintered timeline in their own right. That is not part of the main, prime timeline that now is being turned into a TV show or movie property.
I'm going to throw,
for example, the whole Loki
spoiler.
thing.
Major spoiler for Spider-Man here. In the trailer for Far From Home, Nick Fury tells Peter Parker that the snap created an alternate reality, split things off into different realities. Essentially, now there is the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. So things are going to be very different from now on, and that's going to play into a lot of the stuff like Loki, as you're saying.
Yeah, and we can get into that. But first thing, directly with this movie, the easiest one to notice is Loki. So when they go back in time to, was it 2010, 2012, whatever it was?
2012.
Yeah. So Loki escapes with the Tesseract, so he's never captured. The Tesseract isn't even in their custody yet because of what we had just talked about with how time travel works in this universe. It didn't affect the main Prime universe at all, but he's split off. There is a universe where he's not good. He hasn't been reformed. He's still a sneaky evil bastard. And wouldn't you know, they had announced before this movie came out that he's got a TV show in the works, and people thought, is it a prequel? What's going on here? Well, it's not a prequel. It's a continuation, obviously, of that timeline where he escapes.
Which opens up so many storytelling possibilities, which is kind of smart how they are handling this. The other one, I don't know how they're going to do this, is they've released some set pictures, and I don't know where they're set, but the other TV show was Scarlet Witch and Vision, and the TV show, which has the stupidest name, it's called WandaVision.
Sounds like a type of television.
And it takes place in the 50s, which I don't get.
Now,
but then again, with time travel, they can do whatever they want.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think that one is directly connected. I am wondering if this has to do... because Scarlet Witch is an X-Men character, right?
Yes. Well, no, she's more of an Avengers character if you really want to break it down.
But I'm wondering if this is how they're going to sort of bridge the gap between...
mutants?
Yeah. Like, are they going to... Like, is this not going to be based in the Prime MCU universe? Is this going to be based in the X-Men universe as like... and they're going to explain how, like you said, the multiverse happened? Because I think this is how they're going to explain X-Men, how they're going to bring mutants in, is that X-Men is not from, Earth Prime, or it's from a different Earth Prime or whatever, from another universe. And they're going to show shows that are based in that universe and then have them merge into this multiverse sort of storyline, because that's what they're going to do for the next phase. It's definitely going to be showing off all these individual properties. Like, there's going to be a Fantastic Four movie that somehow works. Somehow it's going to work because it's now finally in their hands, and they're going to find a way to merge everything into one big storyline. Now the Scarlet Witch one, I don't know if that property is going to be one of the things that drives Disney Plus as far as sales go, especially if it's not connected or based in the 50s. I think the Loki one will definitely pull people in, because Loki also has a super duper high audience viewership score with women. Like, there's entire communities that are just like, how hot is Loki, right? So it's going to be a case of they're going to get a lot of different demographics watching it. I think Scarlet Witch one's going to have to be more of the hardcore comic book fans that want to watch it.
Yeah, that's why I'm into it.
Yeah, versus the general audience. The Loki one will pull in all the casuals. Isn't there a Hawkeye one in the works as well?
Yeah, Hawkeye, which will probably follow him training Kate Bishop, if it's based upon the same storyline from the comics. And
that being said, you know what I think that's going to do is that'll pull in the kind of audience that watches the CW's Arrow.
That's what I think too.
Because CW's Arrow is ending, I think, next year.
Yeah.
So I think it'll. I mean, it's not even like an apples and oranges thing, because they're basically the same character, except one has Batman level money.
Yeah, the other show is going to be a Falcon Winter Soldier show, and I wonder if that will be Sam being trained to be the next Captain America.
And that'll probably be, as far as feel of the show, that'll probably be like a Flash type show. Like, I feel like they're probably going to model some of these shows on what's successful on TV currently, and that is, Marvel has traditionally done very poorly when it came to television, and they might want to model some of their shows after what's been really successful, which are the CW verse DC shows. Like, I guarantee you that the Hawkeye one will be basically Arrow.
Yeah, I could see that. In a similar vein, I have to wonder about Black Widow and her movie that's supposed to be coming out in the near future.
It's supposed to be set. It's either set before the Avengers 2012 battle or just afterwards. So, if anything, we'll finally see what happened with her and Hawkeye in Budapest. That's my big guess. It'd be really sad if we didn't. Or it'll be her in the KGB rather, and her defecting to the U.S.
I can see that setting up with the opening scene, her falling on Vormir, and zooms in on her face, and she just says, "So I bet you're wondering how I got here." Record scratch.
What is that from? Like the Wonder Years or something?
I don't know. It's just a trope that I know now.
It all started. But yeah, I'm hoping the Black Widow movie has a Jason Bourne type feel to it. I want a hard spy thriller, because I think the Marvel Universe could really do with something like that, because we've had virtually every other type of movie except a horror movie. We've had, I guess you could argue, Lovecraftian horror with Doctor Strange, kind of, and Dormammu.
A little. It wasn't.
But I want a
impending.
hard. Yeah, like I want something like Jason Bourne or James Bond. That's why I'm hoping we get this I hope it's Black Widow and Hawkeye. I really hope so.
Well, I was just looking at the Disney Plus slated library of stuff they're going to put out, and the Hawkeye is going to be a limited series. So that means it's going to be like probably 6 to 10 episodes as a miniseries. So they're not expecting it to be a continuing thing. So is it literally going to be him training the next person, like you were saying? I think it's going to be him training the next person who will then go into the movies as like the new Avengers or something. So if they're smart, this will be a way to almost force people to get Disney Plus. Is this character is going to show up in the next Avengers, and you're like, who the fuck is that? They're like, you have to watch Disney Plus to find out.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, because now they're setting up the young Avengers timeline. I mean, even with Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, his daughter, who's now a teenager, in the comics, she becomes a character called Stature, who's a young Avenger. Kate Bishop is the new Hawkeye. And even... Okay, I don't want to go too nerdy with some of the comic stuff here, because I could go real deep dive here. One of the things I wonder that the time travel thing is setting up, now that there's supposedly a multiverse, because don't forget, even with Spider-Man Far From Home, with Mysterio saying, I'm from Earth but not your Earth, Mysterio is a con man. Quentin Beck is a motherfucking liar. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's pulling one over on S.H.I.E.L.D., but that's neither here nor there.
And not just that, like it's my roommate's a pretty big, like he has an entire wall of Marvel comics, and he was telling me like every iteration of that character has been a liar. Like they're not going to change that for this property. But what they're not going to do like the whole maybe he's a tragic hero, maybe he actually wants to be good, but he still does bad things. No, he's only about the money and everything. So if this truly is, like, he could be lying about being from a multiverse. It could be completely made up. But if that is true, like if the multiverse thing is true and he's from another universe, it could be a case of, in that universe he's a con man and all, and he makes his robots and special effects because he's supposed to be an actor, right?
Yeah.
Like and even the fact that like he looks like Jake Gyllenhaal could be fake, and we could have like Woody fucking Allen underneath that a hologram suit or something. But the idea is there's a possibility that over in his world he's a con man, and that are they going to do it where he comes here and he's like, maybe this is a fresh start for me, maybe I can be a good guy, and then he gets found out to be a con man, and then ends up going back to his bad ways. Like maybe it literally is, I can have a fresh start.
Well, one of the things that makes me wonder, and this is a wider question about the MCU, is who's the next big bad? Obviously, it's not going to be Mysterio, though I didn't think I didn't think they could make Fishbowl Head look cool, and he looks cool. They made Vulture look cool, and his costume's fucking ridiculous.
Well, but that's also a testament to the actors they picked. So, but as far as, I would say an easy go-to that everybody knows is make it Galactus. Like, bring in You bring in the Fantastic Four, and the only way that would really make sense is to have Galactus. If this is a multiverse thing, he's just like boom, and you're like, oh well, fuck, it's a planet-eating monster planet. You could go farther. Didn't people say it was going to be what, like
Kang the Conqueror is another one. He's a time traveling villain.
Because isn't the idea, if they're doing the multiverse thing and pulling in the X-Men and everything, wouldn't it be, was it Secret Wars or something? Is that the
the Beyonder? That's a possibility for 10 years down the road. Yep.
Like for farther, yeah. But I do think, like, in the short term, the next big bad for like whatever the next Avengers, because they're going to do a thing where it's going to be 2 or 3 Avengers movies for to send off the arc, sort of thing, right? Like, I would assume for the first one, if you're smart, you do Galactus, because it's a character that everybody knows, and it is a good way to reintroduce the Fantastic Four. If not, I don't know who. Like, they might have to recast them again, like for the 3rd or 4th time. The other thing would be, do you bring in something from the X-Men?
If I had to pick villains from the X-Men, obviously the big easy is Magneto, but the problem is not having Ian McKellen, I think, would hurt it. And even having who's the young Magneto? Help me out here. Fassbender. He's a great Magneto. I don't know what you do. I mean, if I had to pick an X-Men specific villain, but if you want to follow the X-Men movies, I'd love to see them do Onslaught, because I think they could, but you'd need to build it up over the course of like 7 or 8 years, but you could do it. Apocalypse again, but
it's too close for Apocalypse. Too soon.
It's too close for Apocalypse. But you could do it. That's the thing.
And with Dark Phoenix, like, as terrible as that's going to be, they're already doing like the Shi'ar Empire, so
that could be cool if handled
depends,
properly.
Because it looks like they're only having the one character from that Shi'ar Empire in this movie coming up. So they could do the Shi'ar Empire, they could do other things, or would the smart move be using something from Spider-Man? But Spider-Man stuff isn't usually as big.
Spider-Man stuff is typically street level. I mean, the biggest Spider-Man villains you could argue, are Venom and Carnage, and even anybody else who's had a symbiote over the years.
Well, what was it in? Remember the end of the '90s cartoon when they had Madam Web and all that? Was that Secret Wars they were setting up?
Yes, they did have a version of Secret Wars. Yeah.
So I guess maybe not Spider-Man. I'm trying to think other things that are galactic, or do you go down the route of
Annihilus is another good villain from the Negative Zone.
You could be steering this towards the focal point being, like, it looks like that they're steering towards is Captain Marvel and the Guardians being the next focus, because, like, they in the trailer for Spider-Man, they're like unavailable, on another assignment sort of thing, and the setting up the Asgardians of the Empire at the end, or Asgardians of the Galaxy. Sorry, you could. It could be a Thor based or Guardians villain. I wonder. I think it's going to depend entirely on what happens in the next Guardians movie now that that's in full swing of production. Yeah,
because I know they set up Adam Warlock at the end of Guardians 2, and he starts out as a villain who becomes a hero later, and even wields the Infinity Gauntlet. At least he did in the 90s for a while.
Wait a minute. What about Doctor Strange? One of his villains, because wouldn't it make sense if this is a multiverse sort of thing to use somebody who can actually travel through dimensions?
Well, they've already used his big bad, which was Dormammu. I guess, they did kind of set up Baron Mordo in the last one, if I remember right. He was kind of... again,
too many sorcerers.
Yeah, getting comic nerdy here, Overload. I don't know. I mean, I want the big villain to not be a universe threat. I want it to be more focal. That's why, if I had to pick a big villain, Kang the Conqueror is a time-traveling villain. That could be really interesting, especially now that we've opened that door. Annihilus opens up the door to the multiverse, which is an interesting thing because that's the whole negative zone and alternate dimensions, blah, blah, blah. Galactus on a planetary scale is a great villain. Great introduction to the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer, which it wouldn't surprise me if the Silver Surfer shows up in a post-credit scene in the Asgardians of the Galaxy, which I think would be fantastic. I'd even be cool if they brought back Lawrence Fishburne to voice the Silver Surfer, because I thought he was a great Silver Surfer.
Well, but he's playing Goliath, right? So
yeah, that's true. I forgot.
Or do they finally go back into the well of like Hulk villains and bring back like the leader or somebody, or do they do something like, because you know how he was on, was it the Junk Planet or whatever, like for Planet Hulk? Like there is stuff in there that they could go into a gap of there's somebody he pissed off while he was there or something like that.
Mm-hmm. That's another distinct possibility. I don't know too much about the Hulk. I know about the leader, Abomination, Absorbing Man, which was horribly stupid in the Ang Lee version, but they even did Absorbing Man in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was remarkably better than the Ang Lee version. But I digress. I don't know. Endgame certainly leaves the door open for any number of ways for them to go, and with the Russo brothers finally leaving the universe behind for now, guaranteed Marvel's going to back up a truckload of money to their house and say, look, man, we need your magic again. Like BioWare magic.
Yeah.
You know what? I think it depends on like where we'll really see where the direction is going is who do they get to helm the properties that we haven't seen. Like we know James Gunn is back, so there's at least one person that's made hits that's going to be doing more movies. You get the feeling that Guardians is going to be pretty good, but is like Taika Waititi, is he going to come back to do stuff? Or like it's all going to depend on the tone. I think they've found that, with the exception of how the Avengers was done, the most successful things they've done have been these comedy actions. So it's going to depend on who they start getting for the next properties, and you'll be able to tell the tone of the films and the kind of movies they're going to do by who they pull in. If they start pulling in more serious directors, you might see a drop off with some of the family friendly stuff. It's completely up in the air right now, and not only that, you've got like other properties like their competitors. It looks like for the most part the Justice League stuff on DC is pretty much done as far as a connected universe goes. They've done little hints here and there.
They're all just kind of standalone-ish.
Yeah, everybody wants to, like in the movies, they all want to talk about or connect it to, like Wonder Woman was really good, but they want to connect everything now to Aquaman because it's their first property to make over $1 billion. That wasn't actually, I think it's made more than the Batman movies have made.
Yes, it did.
So, you know, they'll want, and that is the movie that had the closest tone to like a Guardians or a Thor. So, you know, they've got competition there. And then, you know, out of, you know, left field, you're going to see in the next 2-3 years a shit ton of movies from Sony, because Sony, other than the Spider-Man movie, you know, they've got nothing else.
They got Venom.
Yeah, but Venom, I still haven't seen it, and I know it didn't perform the way they wanted it to perform.
It was okay, and it did get a sequel.
But what Sony is doing now is they got like a multi-year, like a 10-year deal with Valiant Comics. You know, the sort of super huge company from the 90s that went away and now is back again. They've got, I think for February of this coming year, Bloodshot is the first movie they're doing with Vin Diesel, and it's like $100 million comic book adaptation, and they already said they're doing a connected universe with all their films. So they've got that, Harbinger, and a bunch of, like, probably about 4 or 5 other properties that have deep-rooted connected stories that they're like, hey, if they can do it on that scale, maybe we can do it, but instead of spending $200-300 million a picture, maybe we can spend 60 to 100. Mm-hmm. And they're going to have that universe. So you're not going to, and then other companies are going to do the same thing. Who knows what Lionsgate is going to do, because they lost all the Marvel properties now back to Marvel. So, and then, you know, Fox is, I guess, I don't know what they're going to do. Is Disney going to be the one putting out all the X-Men movies, or are they going to leave the X-Men franchise with Fox since they own it anyway and just let them do their own thing? Like, there's all these things that are going to be coming out in the next few years. Or are we going to get fatigued by all the different connected universes?
I think now that Fox and Disney are now one, you'll see Kevin Feige appoint someone he'll put someone in charge of the X-Men universe and say, hey, figure out a way to play nice with the MCU and we'll combine everything to make a true Marvel universe. I think you'll see that happen. I think that's what I think is going to happen anyway.
You know what I would absolutely love if when the Blu-ray comes out, because so much shit is happening on the screen we couldn't see everything, right? I would love, as a tiny, tiny Easter egg, like we saw already people analyzing some of the frames that were leaked online of the Avengers Endgame, showing like Howard the Duck in the fight. I would love if they were just a little teaser, like tiny, tiny, tiny in the background that you zoomed in and you found out Deadpool was there, just like sunbathing in the middle of the battle or something, like doing something ridiculous, like eating a hot dog, not actually fighting. Like, I would love if they did shit like that, so you'd have to like go back and watch it multiple times just to see who's in it.
Well, that brings up an interesting question, or an interesting line of thought anyway. This was Stan Lee's last filmed cameo, where he drives by Camp Lehigh and is like, make love, not war. Yeah, whatevers.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people have been petitioning, could we get Deadpool to be the new Stan Lee cameo?
Which is a positive for anything that he's, and they can make him family friendly enough for those. Like, he already, well, actually for the Stan Lee stuff, it was the last thing he filmed on screen for it. But I do know that they had filmed a bunch of voice dialogue things from him, and they could put him in things still. I think they had 2 or 3 more properties they said they had done. It just depends, like, not that they filmed for him, but that he had done ADR for, so they could always throw his voice into something as a cameo. But yeah, I would think that having Deadpool would be a fun idea, and not mocking him, like, you know, not having him dressed like Stan or anything, but just do like the Alfred Hitchcock thing where he's just like walking in the background, like,
yeah.
Or, you know, let's say that they bust into a town and like there's a big explosion in a movie theater or something, and he's just sitting there eating popcorn, like, just and like really off in the corner that you can barely see.
Yeah, I mean, make it in frame obvious if you're looking, make it like a Where's Waldo puzzle, just don't take you out of the movie for it, and I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, like for instance, let's say not Iron Man, but somebody's making a press conference, have him be in the media at the background, but he's wearing like a 1950s
reporter hat.
Yeah, hat, when he's got like the, you know, he's sitting there with his little pad of paper and he's wearing a trench coat, and but all you can see is his face.
Yeah, see, that's fine, non-obtrusive stuff like that. I'd totally be fine with that. I mean, it's sad to know that Stan's gone, although I did call it last year. I said this will be the year we lose Stan Lee.
Well, his health had, when they said that he was no longer doing appearances conventions outside of LA, that was enough to know that if he's not healthy enough to travel to the East Coast for like New York Comic Con, or like, I understand if you didn't want to fly into Canada anymore, but like in general, every year for the last 20 years, he would make a stop in Toronto for one of the big fan conventions. He would make a stop in BC because it's close enough, and then he would do San Diego, New York, and then usually something down in the Texas area. Like, he would try to cover the 4 corners of the continent.
Mm-hmm. So I guess let's begin to wrap this up. So, Endgame, what was everybody's final thoughts? Tristan, let's start with you.
I thought it wasn't perfect, but it wraps up the MCU phase 1 through 3 anyway. It wraps up the Infinity Saga nicely by visiting a lot of the elements that have happened over the last 11 years of real time, giving a lot of fan service, giving everyone a lot of screen time. Even if some characters didn't get a lot of screen time, like Drax, for example, only got to stab someone a couple times. That's all you really see of him. But it still nodded to everything that's happened over the last 11 years of films. So it did a good job of tying things together, wrapping up storylines, finishing character arcs, but leaving some things open to continue into the future, but also making sure that it's a definitive ending of a story. So I liked the movie quite a bit. I thought it was a wonderful send-off to the Infinity Saga, a wonderful send-off to the first real the cinematic event in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I'm hoping that things continue with the same level of quality going into the future, but I'm also a little concerned that they're going to be different to a point where it doesn't quite have the same magic going forward because of all these time travel and alternate universe things. Might get a little too convoluted for the average film goer. So we'll see what's next.
And Alex?
For me, I really enjoyed it. I know that I have actually a few friends, and including my brother and his fiance, that didn't care for it as much as everybody else did. Like, they gave it, in their mind, about a 7 out of 10. Mostly due to not the pacing or anything, but that it was. I think they were expecting it to be more fun than it was, if that makes any sense, because of the last few films have been these over the top comedies, I think. So I think it was a bit of a tonal shift back to like what this felt more like a Captain America movie than the others. But again, that's the Russo brothers, right? So, take that however you will. Now, I'm going to say the issues I had with it were they didn't represent some of I guess the fan favorite characters. Like, there seemed to be very little from the Ant-Man world until the very end, or until they had like the flashback. Like, there was no Michael Pena, and that in itself is a crime because it would have been great having him summarize,
explain everything.
Yeah, having him summarize and explain everything, even for a quick second. Like, that would have been a great thing. The other thing they handled very poorly was Brie Larson was terrible in this, and then you find out it's because she filmed this before she filmed her actual movie. She was so bland, had nothing to do. She was there as a Deus Ex Machina. I'm going to come in and blow a ship up, and by the way, I'm too busy to do anything else. Bye bye. My planet needs me. Is that sort of thing. She was terrible in this, and luckily she was better in Captain Marvel. But I still, and this isn't anything about her politics or anything. I still think she's too bland of an actress to be in the MCU. She's very boring. She doesn't have any charisma. The reason her movie worked was everybody else but her. So she was better in her own movie. But that being said, here she just seemed sort of out of place, I guess. There was no Goose the cat, which was really, really, really fucking annoying. Yeah,
that bothered me.
I was surprised.
There's nobody from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Even though, but then again, that's because the Russo brothers had openly said they hate the show and won't. They'd never watched it and have only heard and seen bad things about it, so they won't. That's why they didn't incorporate Coulson or anybody else from that show. And if you've seen the trailer they're showing for this final season, it's basically Spider-Man 3 emo version of Coulson, which is hilariously bad. So I might actually watch it just to see how incredibly bad the show gets.
It's like watching a train wreck.
It's one of those situations where the head of ABC has wanted to cancel it for years openly, but Disney has always said keep the show on, even though it's not properly connected. The special effects are worse than Mutant X, the Canadian show made 20 years ago. So that tells you something. So I didn't feel like they represented all of the properties as equally as I would have hoped for. But overall, I think each person had, each of the main cast had good moments in it. You're right, Guardians was not represented nearly as much as it should have been. All you hear with Drax is, yeah, as he's stabbing dudes, which is kind of cool. But, they come back and there's no ancillary characters, no extra people from Guardians that would have. I think part of it is if you brought in the characters from Guardians or some of the characters from Captain Marvel, this whole movie would have been over really quickly because they're so much more powerful than anybody else except for Thor. So that being said, I enjoyed the movie. I would give it about an 8.5 out of 10. It did go by extremely quickly even for the interruption that I had while I was watching it due to technical issues. It was still very well executed that way. I would have liked it if they had set up a little more, because the reality is they know what the future is for the series. The fact that there was no little teaser at the end, it would have made sense. Like, I know they didn't want to have anything in the actual film to tease what's going to happen, in the next MCU phase, whatever. But they could have, after the credits were over, like not even part of the main credits, they could have shown that trailer for Spider-Man there for anybody that watched it, and then not released it online until, this week. And that's my thoughts.
Maybe.
Right.
I'm going to just interject and politely disagree on the whole trailer thing. I think having the credits end and just be an ending lets people absorb what has happened and give that sense of finality and just say, this is over now, and move on with the next movie.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with Tristan. I think having the trailer there would have been a little too much, because it would have taken away from the enormity of what you just saw. My thoughts on Endgame, I enjoyed it pretty well. I'd say it's about an 8 out of 10 for me as well. It wasn't perfect. I wish Captain Marvel was given more to do, other than just, I'm away on a mission for the next however long, she shows up at the end, because I really like her character. I disagree with her lack of charisma comments, because I think, from what I know of the character, it works. But other moments that I really, really did take away from this, I liked how all these characters, the ones got a finality to their arcs. One's like seeing Captain America go back in time rather than come back to the future. He takes Tony's advice and he got a life that was his own. He lived it out with Agent Carter. I thought that was really cool. Him passing the shield to Sam and not Bucky was interesting. I'm thinking, wow, I totally thought Bucky would have got it, but go get him Sam Wilson, because Sam does become Cap in the comics. I felt very, very, very satisfied with this. I mean, I didn't expect Iron Man to die. I always expected the MCU would always have Robert Downey Jr. in some capacity. And now that he's gone, it's a new era. And as we move into phase 4 next year, because Far From Home is still considered the end of phase 3, I'm with Tristan that I don't know what phase 4 is going to hold. I'm a little afraid. Do you go with a time-traveling villain like Kang the Conqueror, or a multiverse villain like Annihilus? Is it going to drive away the casual viewer? Because Thanos was simple. I want to kill half the life in the universe. I need to do these 6 things to do it. How do you make a multi-universal threat something that everybody gets without retreading the same ground? So
I think, sorry to interject, but I think when they planned to do Thanos, they weren't planning on these films being nearly this successful. So
no, they weren't.
I think they thought this was going to be a one and done if they did it, and they're like, this is the biggest money making thing we've ever done. When they were halfway through, after they'd already introduced them, they're like, fuck, Thanos probably should have been the final phase when they were going to be done making movies altogether.
Mm-hmm. So where this goes from here, I don't know. I'm glad I've been a part of this ride since the beginning. I was actually going back through my Facebook memories recently, and I actually had written down on my Facebook, hey, I'm going to go see Iron Man tonight with my best friend at the time. This will be really cool. I'm really excited to see how this movie's going to turn out. And to think, I wasn't there in 1977 when Star Wars came out, but I'm here now in the MCU. So it's a great time to be a nerd, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So thank you, Stan Lee. Thank you, Marvel. Thank you, Kevin Feige, the Russo brothers, and everybody else who's created this wonderful 11-year, 22-film journey for us. And I couldn't be happier to say, make mine Marvel. So for This Week in Geek special discussion on the MCU and Avengers Endgame, we have been
Mr. Tristifer,
Alex,
and I've been Mike the Birdman Dodd, but what more can I say other than enough said?
Well, that's our show.
All right, here's the deal. Every time you watch my show, I will send you $40.
Checks will not be honored. You've been listening to This Week in Geek, your source for guaranteed nonsense or your money back. Tune in next week for more info on the most important things you didn't need to know. Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net and subscribe to our podcast through iTunes or any podcatcher. If you'd like to comment on this episode, head over to this episode's post at ThisWeekInGeek.net and leave a comment through Facebook Connect. Follow us on Twitter at ThisWeekInGeek.net and follow our Instagram at TWIG_official_podcast. Social media not your thing? Send us an email at feedback@ThisWeekInGeek.net. We'll see you next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
Just when you think this show is terrible, something wonderful happens.
What?
It ends.
I have to go. Somewhere there is a crime happening.